Okay.
That's terrible.
Gather yourself.
Hey everybody, sorry about this. Just getting everything set up. Spotlight pen. Hi, Amy.
Hi, how are you?
Sorry, we can't. I'm trying to get everybody going. That's unmute. Add pen. Cool. We'll just give it a couple minutes. Mark, you on?
I'm all good.
I can hear you guys. I was muted. Sorry about that. All right, we're gonna give a couple minutes for people to get on. Literally, just as I got on, my Wi-Fi went down, and I was freaking out. Like, oh, of course.
Of course, that's when it always happens.
It always happens like that. So give a couple more minutes for people to get in. It's nice to meet you, Amy. I'm really, really grateful that you just decided to pop on with us.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it, Daniel. Our office is under construction, like major heavy construction. They're redoing all the concrete in the building and everything. And so you'll see many people in our office just sprinting down the hall with a laptop and some headphones on, trying to get to a place of safety so we can talk and do meetings and things.
Oh no. Well, yeah, I saw everything, you know, the whole rebrand's going on, and you guys are just busy right now.
Yeah, life is really busy. We started helping and partnering with a law enforcement agency a few months back, another law enforcement agency, and they've kept us on our toes. So it's great things. We'll talk about all that though here shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple more minutes. Mark, you good on your
You'll
end?
forgive me.
Cool. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if one of these earbuds pops out of my ear and you see me dive for it, I'm trying to be super technological with my earbuds. Whatever they're called.
Yeah, AirPods.
AirPods. That's it. Thank you.
See, you're way ahead of me because I don't even have a pair yet.
Well, I've gotten made fun of by all of our interns and my kids and all of our staff because I have these giant, awesome headphones. They're big. Looks like I'm tuning into another planet in another solar system. And I get made fun of a bit. So I got these for Christmas. So I'm trying to stick to the young format.
Whatever it takes to stay relevant, right?
That's right.
Oh, cool. Got some more people just popping on. Oh.
Dan, do you want to record this or not?
It is recording. I had it on auto record.
Awesome.
So as long as everybody's okay with that, it's just kind of our default for our sports official, our SOS page. So I can turn it off. But I'd like reference if we can, and and obviously if we could highlight some stuff and use it for everybody, that'd be cool too.
Yeah.
That's up to Amy and Helen later, and you guys.
Yeah, that's great.
We do have a baby in the background, so hopefully she doesn't distract everybody tonight. I'll give it a couple more minutes. Helen's on. Oh, all right, well. Yeah. Respecting a handful more, so I just want to give everybody time, if you guys are okay with that. What time is it out there,
Can I ask where
Amy?
everybody's from? Out here it is 8:04.
Yes, where everybody, for everybody tuned in, I guess I could talk now about the chat. We want this to be as engaging as possible. But if you could right now, just introduce yourselves via chat, kind of say, you know, where you're from, and just your name. Is that what you kind of just names and where you're from, Amy?
Oh, sure. Or yeah, that's fine. I just like to know when we start talking, like, where is everybody? What parts of the country are we all in?
Awesome. So we are, Alicia and I are Olympia, Washington. We're a pretty national group tonight.
Yeah, you got people blowing up the chat over there. So doing their
Yeah, so
intros.
here.
Way to go, everyone.
Denver, Spokane,
Big Island.
Big Island. I wish I was there right now.
Lucky.
Yep, some of us are jealous right now.
Roseville, Mark, you Central Washington, Ellensburg. Cool. All right, well, got my chat all messed up. 13. What's the word?
A lot of Washington folk. You know what? I'm a big fan of the state of Washington right now. And I almost had the privilege to get to go there last week. And I am really jealous that I didn't get to. So
Well,
one of these days I hope to visit there.
Come visit.
I really just want to go play, but
it's pretty locked down right now still.
yeah, that's what I heard. And we were able to transport a sweet survivor last week up to Washington for treatment. And
Oh wow.
I mean, she's minutes from the border, and I was so jealous. And she goes, "Well, don't be too jealous. I don't think the border's open right now, so there's no glacial hiking and stuff up there."
Oh yeah, it's super pretty up there.
But I'm still planning to go and visit her in a few months, so
Oh well.
I'm hoping the borders will open up or something.
Yeah, well, you let us know because we'd love to catch up too.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's enough time. People are going to come on. We'll be monitoring invites. I know a lot of people have said they'd be getting off work at this time, and so there's going to be some transition throughout the night. But let's get started. First of all, I just want to introduce myself. I'm sure everybody else I know most of you, but for those I don't know, my name is Dan DeFalco. I run SOS, Sports Officials Surrendered, with my wife, and we have an awesome team. And we just are so excited about tonight. Human trafficking has been a huge part of our lives, my life since I met my wife, who spent quite a few years doing human trafficking with YWAM. And so when SOS started, we always made it a huge priority to have it as a center of our ministry, and in a ministry focused on a profession that's highly male oriented. We always had the hope and dream of leading the way in changing culture, especially the sexual culture. So lo and behold, we have Blow the Whistle on Human Trafficking Night, and I'm super excited. So just a few ground rules. Questions are absolutely welcome. This night's not just for us, it's for all of you, to be educated, to ask, to be informed. We want and pray so much that each one of you comes away from tonight with just something so close to your heart. And so we'll be monitoring all of the chats for questions, and don't hold back. And for those of you who are just popping on, just send your name and location into the chat so we can see where everybody's from. All right, but let me pray and we'll get going tonight. Heavenly Father, we're just so grateful for the opportunity tonight to come together at this multi-ministry event, this gathering where we get to just hear and have you touch our hearts about this great battle of human trafficking locally, nationally, around the globe. And we just are so thankful that both Trafficking Hope, Exodus Cry, and all of you want to hear more and teach us and do all those things. So would you just move in our hearts tonight? Would you just put something on our heart to move forward tonight as we help this fight and abolish human trafficking? We love you, and would you just set your spirit here in your name? Amen.
Amen.
Well, so co-hosting with me tonight is my great friend. I'm so honored to have Reverend Dr. Mark Wagner, pastor of Ellensburg United Methodist Church, one of my best friends and biggest mentors. But he's a musician, 6 albums, find them all on Apple, all your music places, and also all of his books on Amazon. But he's also launched a new podcast, A Bigger View of God. And I'm just so grateful he's on with me tonight. So here's Mark.
Man, you make me sound awesome. You should come with me everywhere I go and just tell people who I am. Yeah, it's really fun to get to be a part of this event. I know this is very special for Dan and Alicia and for SOS. It's core to their advocacy ministry. And I'll just quickly explain tonight. We're gonna hear from 2 different organizations, from Trafficking Hope and from Exodus Cry. And we're gonna hear from, I think, Trafficking Hope first. Amy, right? Because you're on the East Coast, I think. So we want to hear from you first. We're going to hear from Trafficking Hope for a few minutes, and then we're going to hear from Exodus Cry. And as Dan mentioned, please share your questions in the chat box. Has everyone been able to locate that chat feature? Anyone have an issue with that? Okay. So as you have questions, please share those. Dan will be monitoring those, and he can cut us off or interject as needed with those questions. So first of all, Amy, Trafficking Hope. So I'd love for you to share with me a little bit about your organization. What's your mission? And then also, what's your role with the organization?
Sure, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me on tonight. We really appreciate the opportunity, and really to be put on the same podcast with the great Helen Taylor is wonderful. We love Helen Taylor and Exodus Cry, and so she's actually a friend. So I'm really excited to do this tonight. So Trafficking Hope was founded in 2007 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, by at the time businessman named Lee Domingue and his wife Laura. He's now pastor, and they had traveled. So they were friends with Nick and Christine Kane, and they were in the process of forming what is now the 821 campaign. And Christine Kane comes over to their house, and she's like, "Hey guys, have you heard about trafficking?" And she starts going into trafficking and telling them about it. And they're just, and my boss, Pastor Lee's like, "Oh, look, I need to see this. I need to hear this. I don't understand what you're saying." And so what they did was they went overseas with Nick and Christine, and they saw trafficking, and they were just completely heartbroken for it, to see what happened. And so then when they came back to the United States in Louisiana, down in Cajun country, they found out, oh no, we have this problem here. It's not just far away, it's right here. You can reach out and touch the problem here. So they decided that they wanted to help churches get involved in the fight combating sex trafficking. So in 2007, they founded Trafficking Hope, and put together what we call the CARES initiative. Like every pastor, Pastor Lee has that pastor disease, that acronym disease. And so, which makes everything, helps us all remember everything. But the CARES initiative stands for: C is coalition, A is awareness, R is rescue, E stands for education, and S stands for services. So it's a 5-pronged holistic approach for how the church can be involved in combating trafficking. But in our curriculum, we also talk about how the church should not be involved in trafficking. We are called to do things a certain way and to kind of stay in our lane. We don't want to pretend that we're law enforcement. We don't want to pretend that we're someone we're not. We want to stay in our lane and support in ways that help other people accomplish their goals, and combat trafficking. And so we definitely believe that that God has a space for us, for his people, in combating trafficking. So the CARES initiative is when a church, we have churches, actually a lot of them in Washington State, that partner with us. A friend of our organization, Molly Vinsky, lives in Washington State, and she actually wrote a book called Caged No More, and Trafficking Hope produced it and turned it into a movie, and it's called Caged No More. And but it's about familial trafficking. So that's a little bit of background about Trafficking Hope. We partner with churches all over the state, literally from Washington to Florida, that partner with us. And what we do is we have curriculum that has Bible verses in it, and it's all biblically based, and it comes along with homework. And so we give that all away for free to churches. There's a lot of churches who want to be involved in this space, but they just don't know kind of where to start, because when you know, I've been doing this now for 10 years this month. And when I got involved 10 years ago, a lot of churches were like, we want to be involved, but oh my gosh, what do we do? Is there a plan for this? Is there a curriculum? And so fortunately, there are a lot of amazing organizations that have a lot of amazing curriculum, including Exodus Cry. We actually use their intervention manual that Helen wrote as part of our training. So, but anyway, a church that wants to partner with us, they sign up on our website. We talk to them, and then we give them everything that we do as suggestions. We give them access to all of our curriculums, and then they go and have it, and it's free. We don't charge for that, because the goal is coalition, coming together, collaborating. How can we work together to fight this? So that's really kind of the heart of Trafficking Hope, and how each church uses that CARES initiative and which parts they take ownership in their community and help out. That depends on that church and where they're at. So I attend a really large church here in the country, and so I help and kind of oversee all the efforts of that church. We have like 20 something campuses, so we have a large footprint. But some of our favorite partners are churches who have one location, and they've got there may be a church of like 100 people, and they're just so passionate and so involved. And so it's really fun. In the role that I'm in, I'm the Alabama director for Trafficking Hope. But I wind up working with people all over the country, really, and traveling, doing conferences and things, and training people and training advocates to get involved. And so we get to work with very small churches, medium-sized churches, large churches. But what's fun is we're all the church, and that's what makes the big difference there. That's what makes it so fun, is coming together. So yeah, that's a little bit about Trafficking Hope and what we do. We have a CARES 101 curriculum that's kind of human trafficking 101, who, what, where, why, how, and how to get involved and how not to get involved. Then we have 2 different prayer curriculums. One's a 9-week curriculum and one's a 6-week. And then we have a men's only curriculum. And then the last curriculum we have is a 4 to 6 week curriculum that goes along with the movie Caged No More. And that's really for our junior high and high school students.
So it sounds like your mission really is to provide training and resources to churches that are interested in learning how they can get involved in stopping human trafficking.
Yes, I forgot to say that part, but our mission is to eradicate sex trafficking by equipping and empower the local church to be engaged in the fight in their community against sex trafficking.
That's great.
Yeah,
so
that's
it's advocacy, it's awareness. So
it's coalition.
Yeah, it's building partnerships. First of all, before I forget, would you be able to share in the chat a link to your website?
Yeah, sure. We actually just completely redid our website.
And I'm guessing folks could look at some of those resources on your website.
Yeah, so the curriculums are on a private link for all of our church partners to use, but they can go on our website and find some other resources and look through, and they can see what it looks like to partner with us, and talks about the CARES initiative and all that stuff. So yeah, they can go on there, and there's also a men's pledge and things like that. But yeah, we'd love to have you go on there and look.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear a little bit about the motivation for you personally, but also
sure.
It sounds like faith plays a big role in why you do what you do, and I'd love for you to tap into that a little bit.
Yeah, so I was kind of one of those lightning bolt moments. They're kind of rare when God brings them to you, but in 2010, I was at a women's conference at my church, and there was a woman that I knew from our church, and she was up on this big screen, and they were talking about women doing big things, and she was talking about how she leads human trafficking groups at our church and helps people become aware of it. And in 2010, it really just was not talked about. In fact, that was the year that we actually passed the law in Alabama for human trafficking to become illegal. So it wasn't talked about, certainly not from the pulpit. I mean, it just wasn't a really big topic here. And so when I heard her talking about that, I thought, ooh, good for you. I would never do that. I am more of a mani-pedi, let's go to the beach ministry. Where is that at? And then I heard nothing about it, didn't know anything about trafficking. And 3 months later, literally out of the blue, I was getting ready to go to church. And I mean, I was doing my hair, and literally out of the blue, God had me on my knees in the floor crying about victims of trafficking. I'm not a crier. Like you really have to hurt me to get me to cry. I just don't cry. But I was sobbing about victims of trafficking. And it was that lightning bolt moment. And I was inconsolable. You know, we're heading to church. We're trying to walk in church. And my husband's like, are you okay? What did I say? And I'm like, nothing. He's like, kind of get it together. You're scaring the kid. Yeah. And my husband's so sweet. So we get to church, and that morning, 3 different times, our pastor mentions survivors of sex trafficking in his sermon, and it was not talked about. So I was like, okay, God, I had to leave the service, and I went into the bathroom and prayed and said, okay, God, turn the waterworks off, and I'll call that lady I saw on the screen, because I know no other way to get involved. And when I called her, she said, yeah, come to our small group and we'll teach you about it. It's a 12-week small group. So I went the very first night, and I was just sorry, excuse me. I was just completely broken and just honestly righteously offended that a human thinks that they can own another human. And God was really doing something in me. And when I got done with that very first meeting and they had related it and equated it to slavery, I was just profoundly upset. And I went up to her after the meeting and I said, hey, look, it's Alabama. You know how I roll. Let's get in my car. I got a gun. We're just gonna go handle this. Let's just go downtown. We're gonna start, Wild West, wide open this whole town, and let's clean it up. And she was like, no, that is a bad idea. That is not how we do this. So fortunately, the Lord is good and patient with me. And so many years later, there was a lot of growth, obviously, but it was really profound that God took me on a journey of leading all these awareness groups over and over and over again until I was really ready to completely submit myself to him and say, okay, I have my ways of how I think this should happen, but your ways are so much better. So I learned about Trafficking Hope had come on board. Pastor Lee had come on staff at our church at that point, moved to Alabama. And I joined up with the Trafficking Hope team. We led small groups the whole time, but it was all homegrown material. So we were very thankful when Trafficking Hope came on board and brought with them the structure and the staff and the support and everything. So when I stepped into that role, I basically had the gift of time. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I thought, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom. What can I do to combat trafficking? We're always disqualifying ourselves from what God has called us to do. And I thought, well, I don't have any training for this. And he said, I don't need you to have training. I just need a willing heart. And so we just began learning and researching organizations and what they were doing and what does their outreach look like. And then we began coming up under the wing of people around the states that are doing good stuff. And we began building a team here. And next thing you know, we've been doing night outreach for 3 years, where we go out on the streets at night and we go to the places where they are. Like Jesus would have left the pulpit to go and be where people are. And so we do that. And we try to find people, and we just, our entire goal is to love them. And that's it. We're not trying to rescue people. We're not out there. They need to feel love, and they need relationship. And that comes from that love. So we do that. We do online outreach, where we have like a group of women that will text ads where sex is sold online. And we reach out to them and try to meet up with them and start real genuine relationships, take them out for coffee. We always give them gifts, hygiene kits, clothes, food, whatever they need. We're going to meet immediate needs first, because that's how Jesus would do it. Meet those immediate needs first and really genuinely love them. we just added a wonderful new weapon in our tool belt, I guess here. Epic. I don't know if you've heard of Epic Project, but we've brought Epic Project along board here. And what they do, that gives our men who are in the fight a really boots on the ground way to combat trafficking. So it's where men are able to reach out to other men who are in the process of trying to purchase sex at that time. And so our guys will be able to reach out to them in a loving and non-condemning way and see if they can stop the sale, stop the purchase, but also redirect them and come alongside them. So we've partnered with some organizations of people who are who minister to those who have like a sex addiction and pornography addiction, so that we can set them up for success too. So those are just some of the things. We work a lot with law enforcement. We go on their undercover operations, and sometimes we'll have our male advocates go and talk to the men who are getting arrested for purchasing sex, and just talk to them man to man and non-condemning, non-shaming, and just try to, they'll pray with them and try to connect them with resources afterwards if they want it. And then we also go when they're trying to rescue females, or when they call us and say, hey, we've got a survivor, what do we do? We will start the advocacy process and meet them wherever they are, whatever time of night, and try to help them out. So we're helping them prosecute their crimes by maintaining a survivor into a good, healthy place for therapeutic care. So
yeah,
there's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. I heard you
I know, sorry, it's information superhighway.
No,
so
it's
I apologize.
good. And I want to just again refer folks to your website, because I'm certain there's a ton of facts and information on your website. So if you're sitting there thinking, man, I want to know more about this or that, check out that traffickinghope.org. So you gave a really interesting definition of, a lot of people hear, human trafficking is been a topic that has kind of popped up a lot in pop culture in the last few years. And thankfully it's something that people have heard a lot and they're familiar with, but I don't think everyone knows kind of what that means. But you said someone purchasing or owning another human. And that was the thing to you personally, that you were like, that doesn't feel right to me. So would you just maybe give me a more, just dig into that definition a little bit more for folks that are kind of sitting here going, what is this? What is human trafficking? And, what's bad about it,
Sure. So kind of wave your hand if you are aware or think you're aware of the definition of trafficking. Just kind of wave. If not, okay. We'll start from ground one. So if there's nothing else that you take away from the definition tonight, take away the word vulnerability and exploitation. So human trafficking is, at its basic form, the exploitation of vulnerability. So human trafficking is works or services that someone is made to do or perform by the means of force, fraud, and coercion. So there are several different types of human trafficking, from forced labor, sex trafficking, domestic servitude. There's even child trafficking, child soldiering. There's a lot of organ trafficking, like kidneys and stuff like that. There's a lot of different trafficking things. We primarily focus on sex trafficking. So based on that definition, sex trafficking is any type of sexual service that is made to be, that someone is made to perform through the means of force, fraud, or coercion. So we see a lot. I wouldn't be too worried about the vans driving around your neighborhood, white van driving around your neighborhood, and let's all put it on Facebook, here they come. That doesn't happen. So when we're talking about human trafficking, the force portion of it does happen, but it's usually not going to be through kidnapping. Less than 3% of people who are recovered were kidnapped and put into it. So don't think kidnapping, don't think the movie Taken when you think about what is human trafficking. By and large, you're going to see someone who's in a vulnerable state. So we're talking, when we say vulnerable, we're talking about an emotional vulnerability. Someone who who has low self-esteem, or maybe they're in a marginalized portion of society. Maybe they're an LGBTQ member, or they're a child. We see people who are handicapped in different various forms. We see people who have mental health issues, drug addiction, certainly. But it's any type of vulnerability. And honestly, I think it's over 90 something percent, and Helen can pull that stat later, but over 90 something percent of survivors of sex trafficking have been sexually assaulted as a minor. So 18 and under, or under 18, depending on what state you're in. So we see that when someone is first traumatized in that way and violated in that way, it sets them up mentally and psychologically to be re-victimized later on, because their body is eliciting a traumatic response. And so their coping mechanisms, their maladaptive coping mechanisms, and I'm sorry if I nerd out here. I'm getting a master's degree in crisis counseling right now. So you can hover on the brain all night if you want to, but you
love it. We love it.
So anyway, we oftentimes see people who have been sexually traumatized at a young age. They wind up getting re-victimized and put out again. And oftentimes we see kids who are caught in sexting and texting. That's a really big thing right now. I've got a couple of things that landed on my desk this week where we've got kids from amazing church families, go to amazing churches. The kids are super involved, and the kids sent a text to someone with a picture or a video. I mean, these are young kids. These are like 14-year-olds. And so then that goes to somebody else, and it goes around the entire school. We see that time and time again. And if it doesn't get dealt with, if that child doesn't get proper care and counseling, trauma counseling, like at that time, they don't feel like they were fought for. And they don't feel like they'll develop their own coping mechanisms, and it puts like a cloak of shame on them that they just don't feel like they can come out of. And statistically, we see that person maybe 5 years down the road, we may be out there looking for them in this industry in sex trafficking. So a lot of kids are very vulnerable. The number one way to traffic someone is to already be in their life. Parents, coaches, pastors, aunts, uncles, friends, you name it. So what we would call familial trafficking. The second way to, most popular way to traffic someone is to get to know them on social media. Get to know them on social media, talk to them, find out. I mean, you can go on social media and find out where they go to school, where they work, what's going on with them. You know so much about them that all the trafficker has to do is start pouring into that. I love you, you're so beautiful, you could be a model. And then they look on there and see that this person really loves Labrador dogs. Well, oh my gosh, I've got 3 Labrador dogs. And so they wind up really coercing this person and connecting with them on all these cool connections. It's just crazy. We have all these connections. And so we see a lot of coercion, a lot of online trafficking and stuff like that. Or a lot of online persuasion.
I think that was a heavy point. I mean, you listed off those people who are familiar, and you said pastors.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the things that hits so hard about this is that, and as a new parent too, I think that's one of my concerns. Hearing more and more stories of not just the sexting and those types of things, but the familiar friends and family who are leading friends into situations like that. And what would you talk about specifically for those new parents or for parents of kids these ages with dealing with this topic?
Yeah, I think that the really big thing that we need to have with our kids, because I'm a parent of 2 daughters too, is to have set the stage for them to come to you at whatever age, no matter what. Some of us may have grown up with parents who said, if you ever come home and tell me blah, 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 or if you ever come home pregnant, or if you ever come home whatever, then this. That's not going to open a door of communication between parent and child. So if from the very young age of being a new parent, if you have that open communication with your child that, you know what, I'm always here to talk to you. They need to know that they can come and talk to you without fear and repercussions, because there are some really heavy things that they're going to come and bring to you as they grow older, as I'm learning. So I think that it's really important to have open communication and just say, honestly, I would start, we just started doing this recently, but like have time set aside where you have like a family meeting and you say, this is a safe space. This is where we all come together and we talk and we share. And if you have any concerns of things that are going on in your school or whatever, we'll just talk with you. We're here to help you. And so honestly, having that, the ability to go to your parents and talk to them, because your kids they're going to come up against stuff. It's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And do you already have a stage set of acceptance, love, family, no matter what, and I'm here for you. So I think that that's really huge. Talking about your body and how amazing it is and what a gift it is, that's really important, especially if you're raising girls, but boys too. I think it's really important that that they know that their body is a treasure. It's not something to be ashamed of or anything like that. And then also digital media, social media, smartphones. Like this is like the number one, like the worst weapon that you can put in a child's hand, especially if you don't have an app like Bark. We use Bark on our kids' devices. And then there's still stuff that we do on top of that. So you don't have enough man hours as a parent to search everything they do on their phone. So go ahead and invest in an app like Bark, and I don't get paid. This is not a paid sponsorship, but some other app that you trust, that you can tie in every app that your kids have. One of the big things we see is parents give their kid a phone. They go, here you go, have fun with it. And then the parents aren't seeing what apps are getting put on the phone. The kids will have secret accounts. They'll delete an app. They'll use an app when they're at school or right before they get home, and they'll have like a Snapchat account, and the parent thinks their kid has no social media whatsoever. But since they're allowed to add and delete apps, kid will download Snapchat, use it during the day. When the parents get home or they're getting ready to check their phone, they delete the app and they're gone. And so it's really important that parents, like, every single thing that my kids ever download to their iPads or their phones, I have to approve that app before they can have it on there. So I think that as parents, we have to be vigilant about their social media, because that is the biggest way to set a child up for exploitation of some sort if we're not watching that.
Yeah.
Okay, and everybody's scared to death to parent. I am so sorry.
No, that's good. That's good. There's some good tools in there. Well, it sounds like some takeaways for me. I think definitely the reminder that this is a local thing. This isn't something that's happening far away in India and China and not affecting our local communities. And it's people that we maybe pass in the hallways are engaging in this type of activity. So can you, kind of as we wrap up, because we want to transition to Helen a little bit, and I also would love if there's a way for folks to contact you, maybe share your email in the chat, because I'm sure people are going to have follow-up questions. That way they can reach out to you. But would you kind of give us, what's a takeaway for us, this group of people who are interested in learning more about this and learning more about how we can be advocates in our own communities and families? What would you say? What would be your biggest piece of advice? This is the next step. This is your action step when you leave here tonight.
Sure. I think that your action step when you leave here tonight is to find out, so if you're a faith-based person, find out what your local faith-based organizations are doing. Find out what your local church is doing to combat it. If they don't have something, then maybe you can tie in with us. If you don't like our curriculum, don't like what we do, Access Cry has great stuff. A21 has great stuff. It's not about a name brand or anything like that. It's about getting involved. So I would say, look and go to your church. Like, that's where I go. That's the pinnacle. I'm going to go to my church and say, hey guys, what are we doing about this problem? Okay. So I go there. If they don't have a resource or a way to get involved, then say, hey, are you guys interested? I'm interested in learning, and kind of go there, because educating yourself and educating your faith-based foundation is going to be key, or at least that was key for me. So find out what your resources are locally there. The second thing would be looking at signs and symptoms and knowing just how prevalent it is. Trafficking does not look like someone getting kidnapped from an airport. It looks like a student who is at home in their bedroom, supposedly doing homework, who is being forced to send a text picture to someone because they did it one time, and now that person is holding it over their head saying, if you don't send me more, then I'm going to post this all over Facebook, and your mom and dad and everybody's going to know what you've been doing. And then but mom is in the kitchen cooking spaghetti for dinner and thinks daughter's just in there doing her homework and has no idea that her daughter is being sexually exploited and trafficked and forced to produce child pornography. So knowing what it looks like there in your local community, knowing what it looks like at home. And honestly, it looks like so many different things. When we talk to medical providers versus when we talk to teachers, we'll give them a different set of things to look for because they're in a different setting. And even in the legal profession, when we talk to prosecutors and district attorneys, we're saying, okay, here's what you need to look for as cues that this person may be a victim of trafficking. And so do a deeper dive. We don't have time to go into all of it tonight. The different buckets. Blue Campaign has a lot of good resources in different areas. They've got like faith-based resources. They've got law enforcement resources. They've got schools. They've got a bunch of different resources that you can go online and look, and that's bluecampaign.org. So that's a really good resource too. But educate yourself. Your takeaway tonight is educate yourself. If you want your church to be a part of something and they don't really know what to do, absolutely you can contact us, and we're happy to help. But if you don't like our stuff, and that's totally cool, we can recommend some places that do amazing work too. Again, it's just about getting involved in the fight. And I think it was a really good point that you made about, it does happen everywhere. It is literally in every community. If you have access to the internet, it is in your community. And it may be in the form of pornography, or who knows what it could be, but it's in your community. I recently learned about law enforcement officers who are actually being sex trafficked, like in my own community. And I went, oh my goodness. Well, there's that, because, and what is ironic about that is when we go and train law enforcement, every single time I start out by saying, okay, raise your hand if you're vulnerable for being sex trafficked, no matter who I'm training. And maybe a couple of people halfway raise their hand. And then I say, okay, now raise your hand if you have kids and you wouldn't want to see harm come to them. All right, now raise your hand. And we go through an entire list of who do you care about that you wouldn't want to see harm to, a pet, a dog, a friend, or whatever, until every hand in the room is raised. And I say, okay, that love that you have for that person, that's a vulnerability that could be used against you to exploit you. Because on a sting operation, or many times, we see females who are low income, don't have a lot of resources, and for whatever reason they trusted a guy. And we saw this one girl, the trafficker took her infant baby, put it in a microwave, closed the door, and said, if you don't do what I tell you to and send me the money, you have to make a certain amount every day, I'm going to kill your baby. And he held her baby hostage in another state while she was forced to go and do this. So we see vulnerability, and we see that, and so it's really important that we understand. I guess I'm getting off topic here a little bit, but we understand what it looks like. We understand that vulnerability, and so I've gone to law enforcement trainings, and I do that exact same thing, and they're all wearing a gun and a badge, and they're like, lady, I am not vulnerable, I'll shoot somebody. And I learned the other day about some law enforcement they're actually being sex trafficked, and it was from prison connections and things like that. And I just went, oh my goodness, yeah, everybody's vulnerable at some point.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing. It's something you said that I just kind of want to wrap up with. Is, we all know kids. A lot of us have kids. We're all connected with young people in our communities. If for no other reason, to know that it's such a widespread thing that's happening to young people in our communities, we should all be engaged in advocacy and raising awareness for this. So I appreciate you saying that. Dan, is there anything else you want to toss in before we transition here?
No, I just really want everybody to check out Trafficking Hope. Amy talked about that divine moment that just overflooded her and overcame her, and that's what it was for us with Trafficking Hope. We saw Pastor Lee guest speak somewhere, and everything about the Hope House and all the other stuff we didn't get a touch on just moved us to broke our hearts, but with so much compassion and excitement. And what Trafficking Hope's doing is just amazing. And so we just pray you guys check that out and get engaged. So,
do you want me to end on a good note and y'all can segue out?
Yeah.
I always like to leave on a note of hope and just a good positive note. So there was a law enforcement operation a few months back. It was a really long, from like 4 p.m. one day to 4 p.m. the next day, and it was a long one. And they took down throughout the week. They eventually found the main trafficker and took him down. But one of the females that got out that night, I was her advocate that night, and she's a young girl. She was sold. Her mother forced her into trafficking and made her start, prostituting, which is child trafficking. Made her do that when she was 13. She did that for about a year. She quit school in 8th grade because her mother made her work to supply her mother's drug habit. And after about a year or so, she sold her to the pimp who was supplying her drugs. And so she became hers. She became his. She was with him for 6 years until we got her on this sting operation back in early October. And she was forcibly addicted to many drugs, but most recently heroin. And in order to get her heroin, she had to, pull her weight and do her deals and all that. And so when I brought her in, she has beautiful, long, beautiful blonde hair, bright blue eyes, just gorgeous, sweet girl. And I said, honey, when was the last time you ate? Because remember, we want to meet immediate needs first. When was the last time you ate? And she just looked at me like, what? She said, they let me have some candy earlier today. And I said, okay, when was the last time you had like a sandwich or something? And she said, she just looked at me and shook her head. And I went, okay, we'll get you some food. And so this girl did not want to go with us. It took us 12 hours of talking to this girl to get her to agree to go to drug detox. And we got her into a drug detox facility on a Sunday morning, and we're able to drive her there. And she kind of fought us. She has had to go in and out of the hospital because her body was so used to trauma that she would have seizures. She wasn't used to not having trauma and drugs. Mm-hmm. And so one time we had her in a hospital. We had advocates round the clock staying with her, and they were she had like an EMG, one of those caps that measure brain waves, whatever those are called. And she ripped it off, ripped her stuff out. And I had to grab her in the hospital, hold on to her and say, baby, you can't go anywhere. This child has not been mothered at all. Anyway, fast forward, she gets out. She goes to one of our amazing facility partners that cares for specifically sex trafficking survivors, just an amazing organization. And she's been doing well. And during Christmas, we went over there, and our team was doing outreach, and we were decorating cookies and gingerbread houses. And when I saw her, I walked in, she ran over to me, grabbed me, gave me a bear hug, and whispered in my ear, thank you for not giving up on me. And she had fought us. She didn't want to be where she was. And she asked me that day if I would be her mentor, which was a really big deal, because once they go up a little bit, they get a mentor, and that's like your person. And so I've always been too busy to do it, but the Lord led me to get some things off my plate so I could do it for her. And then a few weeks ago, she got baptized. She gave her heart to the Lord at a New Year's Eve service. And then a few weeks ago, she was like, I want to get baptized. And so she got baptized. And this sweet girl, on Sunday, I picked her up and we were out doing things together. We get to go mentor stuff. And we went to church and went out to lunch and everything. And it was just completely amazing, because she said, if you'd asked me 5 months ago if I would ever be this way or feel this way or know anything about God or even care about anything, I would have told you you're crazy. It's just amazing what God can do if people are willing to do something. Like, it's just crazy. God does amazing. We get to witness the miraculous, and it's just so awe-inspiring. And Helen Taylor is a big part of that. So y'all stick around and listen to her, because she is utterly amazing, and what they're doing at Exodus Cry is phenomenal. So thank you guys so much.
That's beautiful. Thank
you,
you,
Amy. You're awesome.
Thanks for sharing and being so vulnerable with us. We appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and transition just for the sake of time, and excited to hear from Helen. And Helen, I'm going to dive in with this first question. Tell me about your organization, Exodus Cry. What is your mission, and what is your role with the organization?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for that awesome start, Amy. Totally right back at you. Really lovely to see you on this call. And thank you, Dan, so much for organizing this. So my name, I'm Helen. I'm not originally from the States, as you can probably tell from the accent. I'm originally from London in England, and moved to America 8 years ago to work for Exodus Cry. I got my green card a year and a half ago, praise the Lord. And I formerly, before working for Exodus Cry, worked for an anti-trafficking organization in Cambodia. But really got kind of called and hijacked into this movement really back in 2007 as a university student, when the founder of Exodus Cry, he hadn't founded the organization yet. He just began a series of prayer meetings praying for the ending of sex trafficking after first learning about it. And I was streaming those prayer meetings on the internet, and basically had a very dramatic encounter with the Father Heart of God, where I felt very much scooped in to the place in the Father's heart that was grieving that human beings were treating one another in this way and selling and exploiting each other. And anyway, it's a very divinely orchestrated full circle moment when a few years after that time in 2007, I began working for Exodus Cry. I won't go into the full story, but the mission is abolition and intervention. And so abolition, we very much modeled it after William Wilberforce, one of the greatest abolitionists in history from the UK. So I'm not biased or anything, but he brought about what was truly a miraculous dismantling of an entire system of slavery that was accepted as a hierarchy order of humanity by those even in the church for so long. And as a man who really knew that he was called to influence the very ones around him in politics where God had placed him, lobbied for several decades to abolish the transatlantic slave trade. But of course, that had to happen. A cultural shift of mindsets had to happen first before the legal reform. So kind of looking at his blueprint as a model, we have a real emphasis on cultural reform and legal reform. And for us, cultural reform looks like, how do you shift the mindsets? How do you humanize a population that are being completely dehumanized? Back then in the slave trade, currently right now in the sex trade. So we make films and documentaries about this issue, telling the stories of survivors and challenging and inspiring viewers to challenge the status quo related to sex trafficking or culture or pornography. And we have like a podcast and blogs on our social media, and we do activism and campaigning. And a lot of it is onto hopefully the changing of laws. I just got off a call today where Michigan are currently trying to fully decriminalize prostitution for both the sex buyer and essentially the pimp, as well as the people being sold in prostitution, which would completely normalize prostitution. And not every person in the sex trade is a victim of trafficking. They have to be either under 18 or an element of fraud, force, or coercion to be legally classified as a trafficking victim. So for sure there is that that distinction, but prostitution and sex trafficking, it's really a scale of exploitation. And it's often the most privileged or loudest people who are trying to advocate for sex buyers to be decriminalized, when we actually need to be strongly advocating for harsher penalties or fines. There's a bill that just got introduced in New York recently, a few weeks ago, that would fine sex buyers on a sliding scale up to $50,000. And we know from data that most sex buyers earn over $100,000 a year. They are in a position of economic privilege. They are the ones with the choices. And 87% of them are married or have long-term sexual partners. And then if you look at the kind of power hierarchy of those in prostitution, they are among the most vulnerable amongst us, the most disadvantaged, the most economically, racially, gender, everything puts them in a position of vulnerability, as Amy said. So we are very much taking on the conversation of prostitution, not only talking about the extreme cases of sex trafficking, because we believe that if you don't define the harms around the sex trade, the culture goes one way or another, either normalizing prostitution, which sees an increase of sex trafficking, which we've seen in numerous countries in Europe, or fighting for those in prostitution to be decriminalized. We don't want to put them in jail. We want to give them resources, robust services, exit options, but we want to hold the buyers and of course the pimps and traffickers accountable. So that's kind of the modern day Wilberforce equivalent. So just wanting to give you even a snapshot into like the legal battles that are currently raging right now. As I said, I just got off a call with the district attorney who is strongly trying to promote this harmful law. And then outreach is my role. Sorry, I'm taking, that was a detour. I'm still having to process. I literally just got off that call onto this. So I'm still kind of a little like, oh my gosh, Michigan, what are you doing? So my role is the director of outreach and intervention. And similarly to what Amy was sharing about what they're doing in Trafficking Hope, which we love. We love all of the amazing things that they're doing. We too take teams to wherever women are at risk or exploited in the sex trade. So the streets, strip clubs, Asian massage parlors, brothels in nations or states where there are brothels, over the internet, texting women on websites where they're sold for sex and meeting up with them, doing outreach to at-risk women in jails, and then really training people in how to start outreach, how to sustain it effectively. We really want to build a relationship with the women in the sex trade and then connect them to all the services that they need. And another program that Amy mentioned, the EPIC project, we also partner with them. They're an incredible group of guys that do cyber patrols, disrupting demand, intervening in phone calls of real sex buyers. And as part of my job, just this one last piece of what my role is, which is what very on topic of this call, is doing large scale mobilization efforts around sporting events. So back in 2008, we just began looking into some of the research and data that was showing us that there are trafficking spikes wherever large groups of men gather, because the demand increases, traffickers anticipate that, and will bring in their girls to that city or nation accordingly. And we were seeing that predominantly for all manner of events, not only sporting events, but the top sporting events that we decided to focus on were the Super Bowl, the Olympics and the World Cup. And so for us, what that looked like was going to that city or nation where these sporting events are taking place. If it was, for example, the World Cup in Moscow, Russia, back in 2018 was their last World Cup. We brought teams to Moscow. We did a 24/7 prayer room. So every volunteer spent 6 hours interceding and worshiping in the prayer room, because we believe first and foremost, this issue is a moral and spiritual issue. And to gain authority in the place of prayer, that is a integral part of the schedule for the team. And then every night we would do an outreach, sending multiple teams to multiple different places across the city, and then training local churches. I believe that prayer and mission are two very key banners that unify the church to work together, to pray together. And so by engaging the churches in hosting the prayer room sets as well, and then doing outreach together for the first time, we were essentially helping to mobilize cities and nations in prayer and outreach. And that would often lead to them either starting organizations or developing them or starting new programs. And it's just been a really impactful way to mobilize in these nations and bring key awareness around an event and time when there is an increase in trafficking and vulnerability.
Wow, thank you for sharing. Pretty incredible to have you off this phone call. I can all sense the passion in your voice and in your spirit. This is clearly something that's very close to your heart, and that's powerful, and that's going to influence each of us on this call for sure. Before I forget, I want to ask you to please share your website and in the chat so that we can find more information about Exodus Cry. And then if you don't mind popping your email in there as well, or some contact information for folks that have follow-up questions. But something that we've heard from both you and Amy is that this is an issue that impacts all of us, either directly or indirectly. And you're both doing a lot for awareness and advocacy And I think, I'm certainly struck by the reality that this is something that's close to home, whether I'm aware of it or not. And so I want to hear a little bit more explicitly, in your experience, what does this look like in our local communities? Amy started to touch on things that we can kind of be paying attention to, or whatever. And so I'd love to hear from you, like, what can we be aware of? How can we cultivate just like a local awareness, so that we can be responsible people in our own communities?
Yeah, great question. I think it's really helpful to understand the issue from the macro and the micro. So understanding the dynamics of sex trafficking as a whole, and maybe not just in America, but in the world, because there are some issues that overlap between nations and some are different dynamics. I want to call every single person on this call into becoming an advocate, becoming an ally, taking the time to educate yourself on this topic. And so there's educational resources from the macro of understanding sex trafficking as a whole. And Amy effectively broke down some of the different forms of trafficking earlier. I often feel a bit personally frustrated because I feel like cancer and diabetes can both be terminal illnesses, but the symptoms are very different, the cure is very different. And so lumping sex trafficking in with labor trafficking, yes, there's exploitation happening in both and a lack of freedom, but the reasons and the symptoms and the post-traumatic stress disorder of one to another are very different. So as far as sex trafficking, I would say, obviously I'm biased because I work for Exodus Cry, but we produced a documentary called Nefarious Merchant of Souls that we put on YouTube for free last year. It's a 90-minute documentary that looks at sex trafficking worldwide and ends with many of the survivors sharing their own stories of healing and deliverance through the love of Jesus. That my boss wasn't even planning on providing that as the ending. It was just where all the stories of the testimonies of the survivors led. But that I honestly, to this day, I meet people around the world who say they started an anti-trafficking organization because of that film. And it really effectively touches on so many of the aspects of sex trafficking. So as far as like a global education, that would be the number one resource. As far as if you want to go a bit deeper into this issue, the number one book from like the 50 plus survivor memoirs I've read, this one impacted me the most, Paid For by Rachel Morin. Really recommend reading this. And then as far as your own local community, I just feel like start in the place of prayer. I began like praying and interceding about this for over a year before the Lord ever opened an opportunity for me to do anything further. My order was prayer, education, financial support, then outreach. And I think even donating like $1 to an organization, whether it's a national or local, begins to tie your heart to this issue. And I think that's actually really important before the Lord, as a way to position your own heart to go deeper in this. And then just like when you're driving around, if the Lord like highlights a certain strip club or area or massage parlor or place that's boarded up, or just something in your spirit doesn't feel right about it, start praying, start just saying to the Lord, show me where this might be happening in my community. Like, let's start a conversation where I want you to be putting specific places on my heart, or open doors or connections. I think that when people find out about this, the first question is, well, what can I do? How can I take action? And I just want to like give you all real permission to like go on the due process of researching and educating yourself about this before feeling compelled to take action personally. Learn from those who have done the research and have gone before you, support their efforts, but just really, once you begin positioning your own heart like that, the Lord is the one who then opens the doors and makes the connections. And maybe you'll meet someone who is doing something locally that connects with this, and you'll have something to contribute because you've already researched and found out what's happening. I think as well, like, and with this call being linked to sport, something that I've been praying for years is that more men would get involved in this conversation and educating themselves. We often say that trafficking really isn't a women's issue primarily. It's men are the ones who drive demand. If every man stopped buying every woman or child in the sex trade, sex trafficking would end today. But yet men are very underrepresented at all kinds of events or conferences around sex trafficking. And so every man who organizes a call like this, or who even is wanting to talk about this, I feel really encouraged by, because it for many guys, I think there's a lot of shame attached, or it just feels too uncomfortable. They don't want to talk about it. They'd rather talk about a different issue. And I think that sport is such a, especially male-dominated sport, is such a key place for fathers and sons, and shifting the male culture around women, around sexuality. And like many of you who are connected with this and with sport, this is really exciting. And then the ways in the people that you have the authority to influence in your spheres it's like really, really needed for this issue to be known about more in the sporting realm. And among just men and sons, fathers and sons, talking about this and teaching men that where money is concerned, like money and sex should not go together. Where money is introduced into a sex exchange, it's commodifying, it's purchasing someone's sexual consent. If the money wasn't there, the woman would not be agreeing to do the sex act. And so you're basically paying for their silence. You're paying for them to shut their mouth and do what you want them to do. And in the Me Too era, in the last few years, where this has broken open all manner of conversations about sexuality, about how men and women relate to one another, the power dynamics, I really want to see young men grow up with an understanding of paying for any kind of sexual interaction is wrong, and it's exploiting someone else's vulnerability. It's violating the human right and dignity of another person to have the right to say, no, you're paying for their silence. So I think those are some of the kind of the deeper elements that I think are really important to be talking about as well. Oh, and thanks for sharing the nefarious link, Amy.
I just want to jump in there because, Helen, I mean, you blew up the chat with so many good resources, but I think you're too humble too to jump over something Amy said, but that you actually wrote, and that is being used throughout the world and other organizations, the interventions guide. And I'd like you just to kind of give yourself some credit and also kind of educate us what that was, because I think just from everybody pointing to your work and how it's greatly impacted them, I'd kind of like, for my own sake, just to hear about that.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, I've been in this work 12 years, and I think as more and more people are starting to speak about this in the last maybe 5 to 7 years, which has been so encouraging, I was just like really wanting to give the blueprint to other groups so that they wouldn't have to make all the same mistakes we made, or maybe just it would kickstart them a couple of years. And also having the thought of, my heart burns to reach women sold in prostitution. There's no greater assault against the image of God in a man or a woman than what happens in the sex trade. But the knowledge that I can't reach every trafficked woman, I can only reach a finite number in my own community or where I travel for outreach. But if I'm able to mobilize thousands of others in doing outreach and reaching women in their communities, then I'm able to reach a lot more women. And so that was really my prayer. And it took 3 years to write this manual, and I had others contribute as well. But it was basically like, if someone is going to start outreach in any form of the sex trade, what are the tools they need? What is the education? And so, yeah, we sell it as part of like an outreach kit that anyone is welcome to purchase. And if you know, I would be happy to organize a discount. And yeah, we even to this day though, I do outreaches that I'm not like, for example, the Moscow outreach, we ended up orchestrating a dismantling of a Nigerian trafficking ring involving the Russian police, journalists, media, and that was something I was not planning to do. We were not going into that outreach with that on the agenda, but just by following the leading of the Holy Spirit and him, we text women who were advertised for sex on websites, and we're meeting them in undercover in hotel lobbies. And girl after girl was telling us that they were brought in just during the World Cup, where the visas, slightly easy to get visas in some of these nations around a sporting event, and they didn't have their passport. They thought they were coming in as a way to get connected with an African business that they were going to work at. And upon arrival, their passports removed from them, and they are told that they owe around $50,000 debt, and that they have to stay and do what they're told in prostitution until that debt is paid off. And girl after girl was telling us a similar story, and we realized that several of these girls belong to the same trafficking ring. So we began to do a bit more research. We found out the address of the brothel from the taxi drivers, got the police involved, set up this raid. That this ring had been running for several years, not just during the World Cup, but they'd been able to bring in a whole load of new girls during the World Cup. And as a result, the Nigerian embassy got involved, and this couple who were leading the entire operation got deported and imprisoned back in Russia. And the media exposure really helped shine a light on this happening a lot in Russia, several other European countries as well. And there's a lot of really intense, aspects to it that I won't even go into. But so all that to say, we did the training manual, but we're still learning as we go as well. And during that trip, I did the first outreach with a sex buyer. I really felt like this was something that the Lord wanted us to do, to meet sex buyers in person, but that I, as a female, shouldn't be the one actually meeting up with them. But I put up a fake ad, and all the sex buyers who responded, we arranged with a few of them to meet at a hotel lobby, like a Hilton hotel lobby. I got a physical description of what they looked like, and I had 2 guys on my team approach them in the bar. And once we confirmed that that was the guy, I was pacing in prayer in the restroom, just hoping for the best, because we'd never done this before. We didn't know any other groups who'd done this. But sometimes the Lord just gives you some ideas, and you're like, okay, this is a safe way to try this. And the very first guy they met, he was from California. He'd come out to watch the soccer, and also the World Cup, the soccer. And he'd been a Christian as a teenager. And so the 2 guys on my team ended up talking with this guy for an hour and a half in the Hilton hotel lobby, where they ended up praying for him, leading him back to the Lord, essentially. And he was so convicted about where he was at in his life, and felt like God had literally intervened. He was halfway across the world in Russia, and God had encountered him and was trying to call him back home. And so the guys on our team met up with him the next day, took him to a soccer match. He met our whole team for dinner. I obviously didn't tell him that I was the girl that had been arranging the date with him. And he started going to a church back in California when he got back from Russia, and stayed in touch with the guys. And so for that being the very first outreach we'd ever tried, anyway, I just feel like, that is something, as I said before, demand, reaching the sex buyers. These guys are also often either lonely guys or really disconnected from the ways that they're actually exploiting someone else. They are porn addicts who are wanting to act out the fantasy that their porn addiction is leading them towards. And God really wants to encounter them and set them free as well. I definitely want to share with you guys about our Trafficking Hub campaign, holding Pornhub accountable. But if there's anything else you want to ask before that, feel free.
No, Helen, that's exactly all of that. I mean, first, I just got the chills when you shared that story, and how the Holy Spirit just intervened, and not only protection of you and your team, but that the Holy Spirit came and rescued this guy. And you touched on the hurts and the ill placements of a lot of these people who are partaking in it and who want to take advantage of this, and that's huge. But you moved it right into the thing that I think hits home the most. And I think especially when we talk about Western culture, male sexual culture today is porn, and I'd love to hear, and I really want you to really elaborate on trafficking.
Sure. A lot of people, just to like preface, it makes total sense to us why a trafficking organization would talk about trafficking in porn, but just to preface this campaign, of if people are like wondering how does porn exactly link with sex trafficking, the first time I ever made that connection was in Cambodia with one of the girls I was working with, who told me that she'd been trafficked age 11 in brothels, and that Western men would come in and on their laptops and phones show her pornography and ask her to recreate what the exact sex acts that they were watching, many of which were with Asian girls in the pornography. And that was the very first time when I realized the cause and effect of the fantasy, the marketing of pornography leads to sex buyers acting it out. Now, it doesn't mean that every porn watcher or porn addict does cross that line and purchase a real woman, but for many it does lead them, and every single sex buyer has a porn addiction. So that's just kind of the first intersection and link with Pornhub. Some of you may be familiar with Pornhub, but if you're not, don't worry at all. It's the largest porn website in the world, partly because the company that own about 80% of all online pornography websites. It's a company called MindGeek, and Pornhub is the one they've branded the most to make it more of like a mainstream kind of in pop culture. Even SNL, Saturday Night Live, did a Pornhub advert commercial a few months ago as a kind of a joke. It's often joked about in various forms of media, and they have a pop-up show in New York Times Square and billboards, and they partner with New York Fashion Week. So they're really trying to brand themselves in a mainstream way. And what we've just seen in the last 50 years of like, pornography isn't just the Playboy magazines, like with the introduction of the internet, and then what we have now of the accessibility of the smartphone, the demand for homemade content, accessible, free content is higher than it's ever been before. Most of the videos on Pornhub aren't made in a studio in Los Angeles. They are homemade videos, and kind of like YouTube, people upload them. And what we began to uncover a year ago is that Pornhub don't verify the age or consent on a single video. They had at the time 13 million videos. And if there's no way in place for them to ensure that any person in the videos is not a child, is over 18, or consented to being in there, when there's a video that's talking about middle school, passed out drunk, raped to the bone, or something like that, there's no way that the viewer can be sure that that isn't a real rape scene. And we were beginning to come across case after case of real trafficking victims, one being a missing 15-year-old girl in Florida. She'd been missing for over a year, and 58 videos of her trafficking were found on Pornhub under a verified account. Pornhub had given the equivalent of a blue check to a missing underage trafficked victim. And then, so back in February, we launched a petition. We called this campaign Trafficking Hub, with a petition demanding justice for the victims and changes to this Pornhub website, but ultimately justice to hold the executives accountable. Over 2 million people signed the petition, and the campaign really exploded in a way that was only God, because we're quite a small organization. I know it sounds like, we all do a lot, but there's only about 10 of us on staff, and we're all, we're doing a lot. But this, campaign really wanted to highlight the fact that that real rape victims, underage victims, and trafficking victims were having their videos put on Pornhub. Pornhub were making money out of these videos. There was a download button. So even if they were able to get the videos removed from Pornhub, and for some victims, it took them months, anyone could have downloaded the video and could re-upload it at any time. So it's this form of like terrorism against women, trafficking victims who are trying to recover from the most traumatizing thing they've ever been through. and then to know that videos of their exploitation are on this website. Like, we were absolutely enraged. The more we looked into this website, the more we looked into how this was happening, and the fact that the executives did not apologize, took zero responsibility. They gaslit victims, they deflected, they blamed us. They said, oh, they're some like fundamentalist Christian organization. They're on a crusade against porn. Don't listen to them. And we're like, you have criminal content on your website, like, take responsibility. And we were connecting victims to lawyers to open a lawsuit to get restitution. And we were paying for professional therapy for the victims. But we were just feeling increasingly disturbed the more we found out about this company. And so then fast forward to the end of the year, we're speaking with a journalist, prize-winning journalist at the New York Times, Nicholas Kristof. And he said to us, like, I'm so disturbed by what you're telling me. I want to write a front page expose investigation about this company, Pornhub. So we connected him with different survivors. He did research of his own. Within minutes of going on Pornhub, he found videos of passed out women, and the men in the videos were touching their eyeballs to show that they were completely unconscious. And so he then communicated with Visa and MasterCard, and, you know, and us as well. We were like, Visa and MasterCard, we've been putting pressure on you for months to cut financial ties with Pornhub. And after the New York Times article came out, Visa and MasterCard, they pulled their services. So only cryptocurrency was left on Pornhub. But just in the last week, this is very still hot off the press news, the Canadian Ethics Committee, because Pornhub's headquartered in Montreal, even though they have US offices and international offices, the Ethics Committee have called for the Pornhub CEO, COO, and Vice President to address the allegations. It's the first time they've ever appeared on camera, they've ever appeared in public. They use fake names. They really try to keep their whole business structure very secretive. And we had a victim go on before the committee and testify. So we're right in the middle, like, this call, like, history is unfolding, and we're calling for mass regulations of a mostly unregulated pornography industry. And we also, so the things that we're wanting to see from this campaign, we don't want children exposed to pornography. Right now, an 8-year-old who has access to a phone or a tablet could type in porn. They're 2 clicks away from seeing a potential video of a real rape on Pornhub, because when you go on Pornhub, and please don't, but there are all these free videos that pop up. There's no pop-up that says I'm over 18. So they have zero protections in place from children accessing their material. And my boss calls this a form of neurological rape, where the porn industry wants children and adolescents to start watching their material from their young age, because they know that their brains are the most vulnerable to long-term addiction, i.e. a long-term subscription to their website. So we are calling for increased regulations of protection against children accessing the site. We want we don't want anyone under 18 from accessing these videos. And we want all the platforms, not just Pornhub, but across the board, to put things in place to ensure the age and consent of every person in the video. That should surely be an absolute minimum. Then we want to address coercion in the porn industry. So we've made a 3-part documentary that will be coming out later this year that's all about the extreme levels of violence in the porn industry. Legally, you cannot consent to your own torture, but there is so much torture that is happening in pornography that by international law should not be happening, should not be allowed. Just because someone signs a contract and consents to be waterboarded, that should not be allowed. And we're also wanting to see certain like fetishes of 18-year-old girls who act out as 6-year-olds with teddy bears and pigtails and lollipops, portraying the fantasy of a child. That should be illegal. Like, just because the actress is over 18, she's portraying a child, and it's marketing and socializing a generation of men to be sexually attracted to prepubescent children. So we are in the next few weeks about to launch the next level campaign after Trafficking Hub. Trafficking Hub's still going to continue, and we definitely want to see Pornhub shut down. We want to see their executives criminally charged, and we want to see other websites across the board change their regulations. And we're charging after this Goliath with some smooth stones, this small, tiny Christian nonprofit, but we really know that like the direction of the porn industry and where it's wanting to take our culture is in a very, very dark and exploitative place. And we, especially as believers, have to push back against that and not be afraid of being called a prude or anything like that, but really start talking about the things that are uncomfortable. And I'm British. We talk about sex less than Americans. I'm very aware of the taboo of all of this, but we have to start talking about it more in the church and as believers, and start really like taking hold of the mandate to bring justice on the earth. Like Wilberforce, he got it. He knew that we can partner with the Holy Spirit to bring justice to the earth. And I feel like throughout the Bible, throughout the Old Testament, the people groups that the Lord set before his people to advocate for was the widow, the orphan, the poor, and the vulnerable. Those people groups are at the top of the list of being vulnerable to sex trafficking, rape, exploitation. Most victims of sex trafficking are out of the foster care system or single mothers, and that's the case in pornography as well. Or just very young girls who were groomed as 16, 17-year-olds and signed pornography contracts on, as soon as they turned 18. And I've done outreach to pornography conventions. I've spoken to many girls in the pornography industry as well. And so I feel so strongly that as believers, as friends of Jesus, this was his mission statement in Luke 4, quoting Isaiah 61. And this is part of the gospel. It's not some social justice like thing that is distracting from the true gospel. It's two sides of the same coin. Revival and reformation, social justice and the gospel are bringing God's kingdom to earth. And we should be absolutely confident in learning more about this, speaking about this, educating our families, our communities, pushing back against the dark agendas for the sake of our communities, but the next generation as well, who are the most vulnerable and at risk.
Helen, you've given us a lot of things to think about. And I wanted to touch on this earlier. What a beautiful part of your mission that you're producing these documentaries and these films and providing these resources. I think I'm kind of a documentary junkie. And so I think being able to have those resources and share those resources, something that's approachable and attainable for anybody to go watch a documentary. I think that's one of the challenges for a lot of people is, where do we even go to learn about this? The other thing that you talked about in advocacy work, oftentimes we think about advocacy and it's pretty daunting. If you've experienced any kind of dire poverty, or if you've been to any developing country and you have one of those moments where you think, wow, there's so much going on. What could I possibly do to make a difference? Everybody on this call most likely has some sphere of influence, whether that's with social media or in your church or your family or your community. And so maybe it sounds like a first step might just be sharing something on your Facebook page, or sharing one of these links to a documentary or to a website and say, hey, I was on this call and it was super encouraging to hear about what this organization is doing to help vulnerable people. I know that, my own experience of advocacy, when I start to speak out about something, people often go, oh, he's speaking out about that? That's crazy. I can't believe that. I want to learn more. But you're putting resources in places in people's hands that may not otherwise have had access to them. So I just want to thank you for your passion and for sharing these resources with us. I know I can go ahead and preemptively tell you will be getting an email from me probably tomorrow just to learn about how we can get more connected and involved. But I want to give you kind of one more chance. I asked Amy for kind of an action step for us, for this group of folks who have gathered here to learn and to take the next step. What would be your action step for us here on this call?
Yeah, I would just say, either when you get off this call or the next time you're journaling or reading the word, just come before the Lord with a question or a response. Like for me, when I first found out about this, that was all I had, and all I could bring was, Lord, I don't know how to move forward with this. I don't know what you're asking of me. I don't know what part I can play. This was when at university when I found out about this, but I just said, I just want to tell you that I'm available, and it's a yes from me. Like, speak for your servant is listening kind of rhetoric. And so just coming before the Lord with an open heart of saying, Lord, I want to just commit this journey to you of me going deeper in this, me allowing my heart to potentially be broken for something that I know breaks yours. Just give me the grace to go deeper and learn about this. Show me the people that you're wanting me to connect with, or support the resources you're wanting me to read. Just like inviting the Lord into that journey, really, because I know that the Holy Spirit is wanting to mark his people and his friends with this issue, with this injustice, and then open the doors for them to be part of the healing, the solution. And so I just, my encouragement is take your action step to the Lord. Watch our film on YouTube. It is really inspiring. It will make you fall in love with Jesus all over again, from the testimonies of the way he's encountered and healed the lives of women. I still cry when I see it. Maybe not every time. I've probably seen it over 100 times in the last decade. But it is so it's so moving and inspiring. And just start tracking, even if it's with what Exodus Cry and Trafficking Hope are doing, just even like following us on social media or checking out the website. I think those simple action steps, don't even undermine those, because that's where the journey starts. And then, as Mark said, whatever you read or educate yourself with or watch, then share that. If you're in a small group, do a screening of Nefarious, or send it to your family or someone that you know watches films and documentaries or has an interest in this. But the Lord will put those people on your heart and give you those ideas as well. But thank you. That's always a really great question of how can we therefore respond.
Well, that was a beautiful benediction that you just offered, and I appreciate the encouragement and the inspiring each one of us to go before the Lord. That should be our first move for sure. And I think I could probably speak for most of the folks on this call. We're certainly willing and curious about how the Lord might move us onto the next step in the journey. As you mentioned, it certainly is a journey. So I really appreciate it. Dan, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say.
I am first, Hal, I'm just so grateful. I mean, we haven't met, we haven't done anything, and just your kindness and generosity to just get on tonight and let me bug you while you're on vacation. I'm just so grateful for it. I apologize, but I just feel so blessed that you crossed paths with us tonight and just spoke your heart and shared the Holy Spirit. And I felt the Spirit move, no doubt. And so I'm so thankful, and I can't wait to see what we can do moving forward to help and just join you guys in that fight. So
yeah,
thank you.
Well, want to thank Amy as well. I don't think she's on the call anymore, but Amy, thank you for sharing. Helen, thank you so much. You've given us a lot of resources and things to think about. And I think, I would echo your benediction. Lord, we're willing, and would you guide us? Would you open those doors? Would you nudge us? Would you not just nudge, but push us with force towards taking that next step on the journey? We're not going to save the world tonight. But there are individual lives that will be impacted by us just saying yes to taking the next step. So thanks for giving us your time and for giving us all these great resources.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks everyone so much for getting on this call and giving your time as well. And thanks to Dan and Mark for leading us in the last couple of hours.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, we'll be sending out a lot of these in the email with all the chat stuff, all the resources, and we have this recorded. If anybody wants to rewatch this again, and we just thank you all for joining us tonight, and we look forward to what we're going to do together as a family. So, thank you guys, and have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
I just want to file this.